with the results favoring Gladiator Beast. This was all about to change, as with the next core set, a new era of the game was beginning, bringing the first ever new summoning mechanic since the DM era and setting the stage for a Tier 0 resurgence.
Sem ela não há paz, não há beleza, é só tristeza e a melancolia.
The Duelist Genesis. Release date September 2nd, 2008. Set type Core Set. Major strategies Synchros, Psychics. Impact New Era, Bigger Problem. The Duelist Genesis was the true start of the 5Ds era in full, bringing the first big wave of playable tuners and synchro monsters to the game, and with it would come a deck that would make itself known rapidly in the format and proceed to dominate through the rest of the year. For the first wave of generic synchros not tied to a specific strategy, we received Stardust Dragon, Red Dragon Archfiend, and Goyo Guardian, all three of which would be available as 10 promos outside of the set, with Stardust Dragon and Red Dragon Archfiend having already been released a couple of weeks earlier in the first wave of this year's most deadly diseases, and Goyo Guardian being later in the month as part of a new kit set to the exclusive units, making all three extremely easy to access with the human body. Of these three, Stardust Dragon and Goyo Guardian would be by far the most used, with the former being a level 8 that can contribute itself to negate any effect that destroys a card, reviving itself at the end of the turn, and the latter being a level 6 able to steal anything it destroys in battle. In addition to these, we also received the first ever new monster type in the game's history, being the Psychic type, who all seem to be revolving around paying life points for stronger than average effects. These included Mind Master, a level 1 tuner who can pay 800 and tribute another Psychic to summon a level 4 lower Psychic from deck, notably not one per turn. Krebens, a level 2 tuner that can negate any attack that targets it by paying 800 life points. Psychic Commander, a level 3 tuner that can pay up to 500 life points at the damage step when a Psychic battles to drain that much attack and defense from the opposing monster. Magical Android, a level 5 synchro that gives the controller back 600 life points for every Psychic they control in the end phase. Thought Ruler Archfiend, a level 8 synchro that gains life points when it destroys something in battle, can negate a spell or trap that targets a Psychic by paying 1,000 life points. And probably the most blatantly overpowered card of the bunch, Emergency Teleport, which special summons a level 3 or lower Psychic from deck, banishing it during the end phase. Emergency Teleport, or E-Tele, was by far and away one of the best cards from the entire set, as it made synchro summoning incredibly simple in almost every deck thanks to Mind Master, Krebon, and Psychic Commander all being tuners summonable by the spell, meaning that you had access to a level 1, 2, or 3 tuner on command. This spell would also be a catalyst of sorts for the next Tier 0 mega threat that was about to make itself known, but we'll get to that soon. For the TCG exclusives, we received a couple of extremely interesting pieces here aimed at either creating new strategies or strengthening already popular ones, with the beginnings of a very similar strategy with Herald of Orange Light and Avenging Knight Harshath, support for the previous 6 Samurai deck in Hand of the 6 Samurai, and probably the most impactful in the short term, the Charge of the Light Brigade, a search spell for light core monsters that milled 3 to search, giving the deck far more consistency moving forward. As for OCG imports, the only one of note here was the Tricky, a level 5 monster that can be special summoned from the hand by discarding a card, which would see occasional play as a combo. Gladiator Beast would receive 2 new incredibly powerful pieces in a quest, who returned a Gladiator Beast card from creating hand on tag-out summon, which could include the spells and traps that they included the full archetype name, and War Chariot to pair with it, which was a monster effect negating counter trap as long as you control the Gladiator Beast monster, notably able to be recycled with quests. Book of Eclipse is a board-wide book of runes for the turn, notable for being able to stun synchro pushes by flipping the board down temporarily. Lastly, Gear Town was a field spell that let you summon an ancient tier monster for 1 less tribute, but that's not what it was used for. Its second effect let you special summon an ancient tier monster from the deck when destroyed in Central, which included the previously released Gachiltron Dragon, meaning you could special summon a 3,000 attack body by destroying the field spell. A fun quirk for the game's rules at the time was that by setting a new field spell over a currently active one, the previous one was considered destroyed by this action, meaning that by setting a Gear Town over Gear Town, you could destroy Gear Town manually and summon the Gachiltron Dragon from deck battle, making it a popular option in skill drain related beatdown strategies. SJC Baltimore would be the first event with synchros involved in an impactful way, taking place on September were
picked up
6,
the weapons,
and while yes,
had
they
something
were
to drink, something to eat, and
impactful,
about
it wasn't
3 o'clock they started
necessarily
again.
for
And this
the reason
time,
you'd
William
expect.
sent his cavalry
One new
straight
phase
up the
of the
hill
format
at
made
the Saxon
itself
shield
quite
wall.
powerfully
It
known
banged up
right out
against
the
it and
gate
got no
with this
further.
event,
And they
being
fought
the
and
introduction of the
fought
newly
till finally
coined Teledad, a
the
mixture of the
cavalry began to
previous
pull
Dad
back.
Turbo
And
with
it's
new
then
pieces
that the
from
Saxons
Duelist
made a real
Genesis,
mistake.
namely
The
Emergency
Saxons
Teleport and
broke
Krebons.
lines and
Because
came
Krebons
chasing
was a
down
dark
here after
monster,
the Normans.
by using
And
him to
here
synchro
on
with
level
either a
ground, where I'm
level 4 or
standing,
6 monster
was where
like Dark
England
Breath
became
or
Norman, because
Malicious,
it was here
you could summon out
that the
Stardust
Saxons
Dragon or
allowed
Royal
Norman
Guardian and
one
put 2 Dark
advantage,
Monsters
one
into the
technological
grave,
device they had
making
that
it
the Saxons
trivially
didn't have.
easy to
And it
summon
was
Dad
the use
on
of that
top of
device
it. Teledad would
changed
move from here to be one of the most
history of the Western
oppressively
world
overpowered
forever.
decks in the entire history of the game, being one of the few decks to ever reach the tier 0 position, which it would achieve
It's
over
the
the
way
coming
the Normans
months.
fought that tells
However,
you they were
it wouldn't
using
be
that
the only
device.
deck rocking
Look,
new tools from
see the long
Duelist
shields?
Genesis.
That's
Gladiator
used
Beast
to
came to
protect
play
the
this
left side
event
of
by
the
using the new
because the
Equestrian
riders
War
carrying
Chariot
a lance with
bolstered
the
the
other hand,
already powerful
so he
strategy,
can't fight off
taking
an
first
attack.
place piloted by
And the
Dromul
only
Jupiter,
reason you
who notably
use a
also
lance like
included
that
a Krebons
is
in
if
the
you've
side
got
deck to
device
potentially use
the
synchro
Normans were
monsters in
using.
games 2 and 3. SJC
But
Poland would
still,
take place 3 weeks later on September
the
27th,
Saxons
and at
lost
that point,
because the Normans were
Teledad had
fighting for
firmly
horse
taken
power,
over the
thanks
format
to the
with
stirrup.
11 of the top
Trouble was
16
you hit so
spots.
hard,
There were a
you
couple
lost
of
your
other
lance.
notable performances here, like Zombie
As the
claiming
stirrup
a
went
top
into more
spot
general
using a
use,
combination
the
of
first
Mizuki
change
to
it's
deal
brought
aggressive
about
plays and
was
Raiko
this.
to provide
A
removal
bit
of
of
grave
cloth
setup,
you could use to
as
help
well as
heave
Lightsworn
your
having a
lance
bit
back
of a
out of the
resurgence thanks mostly to Charge of the Light Brigade smoothing out their playline.
60
But
years
neither of
after
these could
Hastings,
stop
anybody
Teledad
who
from
won
taking this
when he
event
was fighting
piloted by
horseback,
Adam Korn for his
wearing
second
more
major
armor to
event
protect
victory
themselves.
after him
So they were
winning
heavy.
US Nats in
So while the
2007.
massive shock
SJC
of the
Seattle
impact
would
might
be a
kill
week
the
later
other
on
guy,
October 4th,
it knocked
showing
you back
even
off your
heavier
horse.
skew in
And
favor
a
of the
fat
new
lot of use you
format
were to anybody in a heap
overall,
on the
taking
ground.
not only 13 of the top 16 spots, but also the entirety of the top 8, with the winning pilot being Pete
Still, this
Gonzalez
was
for a
such a
second
good way to
SJC
slaughter
victory.
people. There had to be some way
SJC
to
Charlotte
make it
took
work.
place 2 weeks later
And
on
by the middle
October
of the 12th
18th,
century,
and it was clear
they'd
that
come up
nothing
with
was
what
going
they
to
thought
stop
was the
or change
answer.
Teledad's
They
performance,
raised the back of the
claiming
saddle
15 of
so
the
the
top
rider
16
couldn't come up
spots.
and strengthened the
Justin
saddle girth.
Arwin would be the winning pilot to take home
That
first
just
place
transferred the
here,
shock
with
to the
most
poor
builds
old
becoming
horse.
increasingly centralized as the
The only
monster
answer
progressed,
was a
seeing the
stronger
tuner line
horse that
trimmed
could
to
take
only
all that
Krebons,
punishment.
and the inclusion of Snipe Hunter in the list having
And
almost
rearing
become
big horses,
stable, able
as
to
anybody who
unbrick
knows will
openings
tell
by
you,
loading darks from the
ain't
hand
cheap.
into the grave. We would see a couple of releases left in the year that would
Now,
attempt to
keeping a
break
man like
up the
that supplied
increasingly
with the
centralized meta,
latest
but at this
weaponry
stage
and
it was
horses,
clear that the
in a
age
period
of
when
Teledad
available
was in
money
full
in
swing,
circulation,
and practically
needed the
nothing
kind
in
of
these
wealth
upcoming
that could only
releases was
come from
going to
land
stop
and
that.
peasants working it. So as you'll see, the coming of the night changed the basic structure of society. It also gave birth to the
Zombie
tournaments.
World.
Now,
Release
in
date
all the books,
October
they're shown
21st,
like that.
2008. Set type,
But in reality,
structure deck.
they were
Major
very
strategies, zombie. Impact, reprints for a tier 3 strategy. The Zombie World structure deck was meant as a sort of
Early
precursor
on,
to what was
the
about to
tournament was a
release in the
kind
next
of
core
cross
set by
between
placing a
the
heavy
circus
emphasis
coming
on
to town
stealing an
and a
opponent's
wild
monsters
free-for-all,
destroyed by battle
where
if
half
they're
the time,
zombies,
things
being a
ended in absolute
pseudo-type mechanic
shambles
like
with
how
whole
Psychics
towns
did
getting
with the
burnt
Lycanroc
down.
boss. 2 new monsters from this structure deck able to steal a zombie either that they destroyed in battle in Zombie Dragon's case, or in the grave because it was destroyed by battle in Paladin's case. This was all enabled by the new field spell Zombie World, which made all monsters on both players' field and grave zombies, and prevented tribute summoning non-zombie type monsters, with the latter effect allowing the card to see side deck play against Monarch strategies. The structure deck also provided reprints of Pyramid Turtle, Spirit Reaper, Zombie Master, Cold Wave, Magical Stone Excavation, Card of Safe Return, Book of Life, Terraforming, Pot of Avarice, Soul Taker, Card Destruction, and Bottomless Trap Hole, with some being great generic staple reprints and the others being great zombie strategy reprints. In addition to this, the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX manga Volume 2 released on November 4th, and with it came Thunder King Raya, a monster that locked adding cards from deck to hand outside of drawing while on the field, and could be tributed to negate the inherent special summon of a monster, being an almost instant staple in stun strategies. This could be seen at SJC Chicago just under 2 weeks later on November 15th, where Teledad would still be the dominant force in the meta, but Hero Beat would squeeze into the top 16 playing the newly released Ryo, now placing more focus on the light attribute with Free the Brave Warrior and Honest. A new variant of Lightsworn would also crack into the top 8 here, being Twilight, which combined the normal Lightsworn strategy with a teched-in copy of Dark Armed Dragon and Phantom of Chaos. able to provide the dad push, as well as Phantom able to copy milled copies of Judgment Dragon for the board wipe effect. Ryan Spicer would take the event piloting Teledad, as to be expected in the format, seeing little to no change in the deck lineup since its last outing. That standard lineup was about to change, however, as the next core set was just around the corner and would bring new tools to attempt to shake up the meta, but would only make the already present issues worse. Crossroads of Chaos. Release date, November 18, 2008. Set type, core set. Major strategies, plants, zombies, Morphtronic. Impact, the menace grows stronger. Crossroads of Chaos would be the final core set of 2008, and it would continue the push of new generic synchro tools to work with thanks to its headlining card, Black Rose Dragon. A level 7 synchro that has the ability to banish a plant from grave to change a monster from defense to attack mode and its attack to 0. Oh yeah, and on synchro summon it can nuke the board. This card alone would immediately shift deck list compositions, as with the previous pool, once people had refined lists, they had cut Psychic Commander from most E-Telly lists because the level 7 pool was not really worth the investment. But now E-Telly plus any level 4 monster could result in a full board wipe. Black Rose Dragon would become a staple of extra decks moving forward, boosted by the second wave of the collectible tins, also providing an easy access copy of it alongside Turbo Warrior, who no one asked for. This was meant to be paired with a new plant support like Nettles, a level 2 plant tuner, Titanial, Princess of Camellias, a boss monster who could tribute any plant you control to negate a card that targets, and Miracle Fertilizer, a once per turn monster reborn for plants at the cost of your normal summon and is destroyed once a monster it summons leaves the field. While a solo plant deck would not take off from this, Titanial would see experimentation as a splash option for some decks thanks to the previously released TCG exclusive Lone Fire Blossom, who could tribute itself to summon Titanial straight from the deck, which would become a popular option over the course of the era once the elephant in the room was eventually dealt with. Zombies received further support here in the form of their new synchros, Doom Kaiser Dragon and Revive King Codex, with the former able to steal a zombie from the opponent's grave and summon it on synchro summon, and the latter able to negate the effects of anything destroyed in battle by a zombie monster permanently. Both of these were locked to only being able to be summoned by the tuner Plague Spreader Zombie, a level 2 zombie tuner that could revive itself by stacking a card from hand on top of the deck, but was banished after it left the field if it was effect. Plague Spreader was almost instantly picked up, not for zombies, but as a dark monster that enabled synchro plays that could remove itself from the grave to manipulate your dark monster count. That's right, it's Teledad support. It also helped that Plague Spreader was without question the best standalone tuner we had at this stage, as it would see play throughout the rest of the era thanks to its versatility. Morphtronic as an archetype would be introduced here, a series of machines that gain different effects based on whether they were in attack or defense mode, with Selphon able to summon Morphtronic from the top cards of your deck based on a die roll on attack mode. Boomboxen able to attack twice while in attack mode, Radion boosting Morphtronic monsters attack while in attack mode and defense while in defense mode, and Accelerator able to return a Morphtronic in hand to deck to pop a card off the field and draw a card. While Morphtronic would not be meta, the occasional pop-up would happen from an OTK strategy surrounding Boomboxen and Radion, able to use Boomboxen for ridiculous attack totals thanks to limited cards. The Iron Chain archetype is introduced here, being a series of monsters aimed at milling and burning the opponent, with the only useful piece here being Iron Chain Dragon, a generic level 6 synchro that mills the opponent for 3 on battle damage. Whitestone of Legend would be a level 1 dragon tuner able to search a Blue Eyes White Dragon when sent to grave, being a useful tool for Exodia related strategies by providing a search for a trade-in target when discarded. Spellcaster strategies received a couple of new interesting pieces in Secret Village of Spellcasters, a field spell that locked the opponent from using spells if you controlled the spellcaster, and locked yourself if you didn't, as well as the TCG exclusives Night End Sorcerer, a level 2 tuner who banished up to 2 cards from the opponent's grave on special summon, and Tempest Magician, who gained a spell counter on summon, could discard spells to stack more onto monsters you controlled, and could remove all spell counters from the board to burn the opponent for 500 for each, becoming a build-around for FTK strategies. Goes and Match was seen as a bit of a counterpart to Rivalry of Warlords, locking both players to only one attribute, seeing a lot of usage in stun strategies of the time and in side decks. Lastly are the 2 remaining TCG exclusives worth talking about, being Gladiator Beast Rediari, who banished a card in the opponent's grave on its tagout summon, and Treacherous Trap Hole, which destroyed 2 monsters on the field if you had no traps in grave. This release would lead into the last set of the year 3 days later, and any hope of changing the format would have to rest on its one new card. And while it would change many aspects of the game, the meta would not be one of them.
Rosa morena, o samba está esperando.
Dark Legends. Release date November 21st, 2008. Set type reprint set. Major strategies, promos, and hard to get cards.
Deixa de lado
Impact,
esta
a new
coisa de
menace to the battle phase. Dark Legends was entirely sold as a reprint set, primarily reprinting cards from the first 3 sets of the game, where most of the good cards among them were once again banned, but had an interesting kicker of the set being a reprint of previously harder to get promos or one-off cards that were in one set before this. These included reprints of cards like Green Baboon, Scapegoat, Dark Bribe, Card Trooper, Destiny Hero Malicious, Destiny Draw, Melteal Sage of the Sky, Nova Summoner, and Galendium. However, there was one brand new card also included in the set, and he was without question the biggest impact. This particular set was exclusively sold at Walmart at the time in blister packs of 2 with a promo included in each, and that promo was Gorz the Emissary of Darkness, who could, when you take battle damage with nothing on the field, summon itself and trigger an additional effect based on what kind of damage it was, being burning the opponent for the same amount in the case of effect damage, or summoning a token with stats equal to the damage taken in the case of battle damage. The battle damage effect made Gorz an absolute staple to the meta, seeing a play in absolutely every deck of the era with very little exception, as now attacking into a completely clear board caused a significant mind game on whether the opponent had Gorz or not. It also caused a change in player behavior that would stick around for many years after the fact, where players who were attacking directly would now attack with their monsters in the order of lowest to highest attack value, as to not be countered by the Gorz token. One of the few cases in the history of the game where player behavior was changed by a single card. SJC Atlanta would be on the next day on November 22nd, and as a note, though Gorz was released at this point, it was not easy to receive prior to this event due to the tendency of Walmart to not stock Yu-Gi-Oh product on the day of release, making a Walmart exclusive promo incredibly difficult to find on release day. As for meta shifts, the only new deck you'd see in the top cut here from the Crossroads release was Zombie Teledad, which was a variant of Teledad using Zombie package to help manipulate graveyard cards and provide draw power with Card of Sacred Hunt, seeing Plate Spreader Zombie instantly finding success. Jerry Wang would bring the event to the standard Teledad, being his second SJC victory this year, seeing minimal change to the standard deck list outside of the introduction of a single copy of Plate Spreader Zombie. This was followed by the last event of the year, being SJC Detroit on December 6th, and barring a surprise top from Gadget, the meta was mostly what we'd expected at this stage, seeing Gorz slotted into many of the decks ending in the top 16. Stephen Harris would take his second SJC title this year with Teledad, playing not only Gorz, but also a single copy of Psychic Commander to access Black Rose Dragon with any level 4, and Tempest Magician with a single copy of Breaker the Magical Warrior. This would conclude the events of 2008 in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Metagame, but a significant change was on the horizon for the game as a whole. Up until this point in history, the TCG side of Yu-Gi-Oh! Had been entirely managed by Upper Deck, as they had purchased the distribution rights for the game prior to its overseas release. In October of 2008, a lawsuit was filed by Konami in the state of California against the company Vintage Sports Cards Incorporated, alleging the company was distributing packages containing counterfeit rare Yu-Gi-Oh! cards. Konami was granted an injunction against VSC in this process, but during the discovery process, they found evidence that alleged the counterfeit cards VSC was distributing were provided to them by Upper Deck Entertainment, the distributor of Yu-Gi-Oh! For the TCG. This discovery would begin a months-long endeavor between Konami and Upper Deck, resulting in the complete removal of Upper Deck from all TCG-related products and activities, having Konami fully seized control of the game from that point forward. This is an important point to realize going into 2009, as from roughly this point forward, Upper Deck and their version of the TCG would slowly fade into obscurity as Konami took over and would be making any and all decisions for the state of the game, for better and for worse. It was still to be determined how this would affect the game moving forward, but regardless, moving into 2009 with the reign of Teledad still in full swing, it was only a matter of time before some kind of change would finally come along and kill the beast. As we leave the wreckage of the meta that was the end of 2008's metagame, changes were on the horizon. We had just entered the 5Ds era proper, and since its start, Teledad was an uncontrollable beast, taking over every event's top cut and threatening to do the same going into 2009, with no shot at a ban list until March, unless an emergency one would drop. In addition to this, a lawsuit was raging on in the background,
as Konami vs. Upper Deck had come to a head with Konami refusing to provide product to Upper Deck for distribution, with Upper Deck issuing a statement saying that the newest set of Champion Packs, the packs uses entry compensation and prizing at LCS tournaments, was not provided to them for distribution, to which Konami issued a statement claiming that it was due to Konami terminating the contract between the two companies, even though the issue was still being debated. Because of this, there was no beginning of the year set release that would usually kick off the year, meaning we're going to be jumping straight into the SJC circuit. SJCs this particular year are also going to be a bit of a sticky situation, as the Shonen Jump Championships were mostly an Upper Deck creation, meaning that with the constant fluctuation from Konami v Upper Deck, SJCs were going to slow off tremendously this year compared to the previous years, resulting in only 7 SJCs in the entirety of 2009, 2 of which would happen before the lawsuit would be settled. SJC San Francisco would take place on January 10th, and surprising no one, Teledad's Tier 0 reign was still in full swing, taking 12 of the top 16, with the remaining top spots going to decks we've seen previously. Alejandro Reyes would win the day on Teledad, seeing a fairly